All right, folks, it's time to talk about how we're going to craft a killer concept for your reader magnet. So let's do it. So something that's really important to consider, and I might have said this in a previous video, or maybe I've just said so many times I can't tell anymore, but it is really important that your reader magnet directly feeds into one of your series. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd have a reader magnet for each series, but I would say start with your best series, and we're going to focus on getting something that feeds right into that series. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I can't do that because I'm writing Academy YA, and the character has to have this you know inciting incident in book one where they discover they have magical powers, and a reader magnet before that won't work because of course a reader magnet has to embody the primary genre and trope elements of the story. So it's YA Academy. Before the character discovers they have magic and goes off to the magical academy, they're just living a regular life, and that won't embody the major tropes of book one, unless like you did something where they lose their memory or something like that. But a lot of people don't like that very much. So what you have to do is you have to think about, like, okay, I either I can put it right before book one, no problem, or I can't because of that. So in that scenario, you say, like, well, could I write it about their parents, about a mentor, about somebody else going to the school? It's going to be a main side character. Could I write their inciting incident, and how they end up at the magical academy or something like that? So that's how you can take even a story that doesn't fit exactly in, it doesn't immediately lend itself to having a prequel of some sort, end up having one. You can even do that with romance. So maybe you're writing a small town romance, maybe you're writing a family saga romance. Well, then you could do an uncle, the parents, something else like that, to set your town up, to set up your family, whatever it might be. If it's a mafia romance, to set up the crime family or something like that. You can do all of those things and have that reader magnet then follow characters that exist in the main series, so that when the reader comes across those characters, like, hey, I know these people, I know their backstory, this is really cool, and then and they get that Easter egg moment and move on in. Other ones are a lot easier. So you're writing like a vigilante series or something like that, where the vigilante's like out there fighting crime each night. And obviously book one has a larger arc and a bigger bad guy. But the reader magnet could just be like an average night out, punching bad guys in the face and swinging from rooftops or something like that. So you want to, you have a lot of options for how you can craft these reader magnets, how you can convince the readers that they want to come on these journeys with you. Now, the other aspect of a reader magnet, of course, then is that it needs to, I said this before, it needs to embody the major tropes and genre expectations. So if you're writing a a romance, the reader magnet has to contain the meet cute. It has to contain like major set pieces that are expected to be there in your type of romance. If it's forced abduction, if it's small town, if it's mafia, if it's bad boy, if it's billionaire, if it's BDSM, whatever it is, those elements have to be in your reader magnet as well. You can't, have a small town romance series and then write a reader magnet that takes place in New York City, because then these readers that are going to see that and like New York City aren't going to be very happy that they've ended up in some small town when they get to book one, because you set this expectation wrong. So it's really about expectation settings. So another scenario might be you're writing a hero's journey kind of story. You've got Lord of the Rings. You've got Frodo taking the ring to Mordor, and you can't really write it about Frodo before his journey starts, or maybe you could. Frodo was always an adventurous kind of hobbit. Maybe he got up to some shenanigans beforehand. Maybe he ran into, an orc or something or a goblin or something like that, or there were human raiders that had caused some problems and he had to deal with them at some point. I don't know how well that would have worked exactly, but if you could fit that in, you could do that sort of thing. But another scenario is to think about the fact that, like I mentioned, about how your reader magnet could follow a different character. In many ways, The Hobbit is, 100,000 word reader magnet for Lord of the Rings, but it is also a story that can function in that fashion as a reader magnet. pull people into this other story. So you can absolutely do that as well. But you do want to sit down and think, how can I make it so that when readers come into book one, they have warm fuzzies. They feel like, I know this place, I know these people, I know these characters, I want to be here with them. And that they have the Easter egg moments too. Because when readers encounter an Easter egg, or like, hey, I know this little bit of backstory that I know about, like the parents and how they fell in love, and the reader doesn't know that, or the characters don't know that. I mean, you are the reader, you do know that, but the characters don't know that, or maybe they don't know the details, or maybe the characters do know that, and they're like, hey mom, this is kind of like how when you met dad, and you're like, I saw that, I was there. Easter eggs like that create a dopamine release in the brain, and that will cause readers to have a warm fuzzy feeling like, hey, I was there when the old magic was written, kind of thing. So do think about how you can do that. Now, in a perfect world, you will actually write your reader magnet before you write book one, so you can work those things even better. But if book one isn't out yet, or even if book one is out and has only, it has been read by a lot of people, you could always write the reader magnet and then go and slip in a few callbacks, to that reader magnet, so that people in the future can have that hey, I was there, I saw this thing experience that they might not have otherwise. Even if it's been narrated, a narrated book can be like 5% different than the print book and still be considered an unabridged whispered sync translation. So you can absolutely go in and like make some tweaks. If you're making a couple of sentences here and there, it'll have no problem at all with like your ebook. You can absolutely get away with that. I've done it several times now at this point. So so really, I can't say this enough, but really do have your reader magnet lead into book one, and have it has to have the same setting or the same characters, ideally both, if you can get away with it, same characters and same setting, because that's really going to guarantee that you can nail those tropes, and make it so that when readers generate an expectation about your series by reading this reader magnet, that expectation is met when they start book one. Screwing up the expectation is the number one way to have your read through fail, and have these people that you grab with your reader magnet and pull them in be unhappy when they come into book one. So really do think about that, and do think about the biggest tropes in your book one and in your series. How can you get them into the reader magnet, and what kind of foreshadowing can you do as well? So do plan on that. Some people don't like major time hops. So if you can get away without having to do a huge time hop, that's ideal as well. Obviously, like I said, in some scenarios you can't. Like you've got the YA Academy thing, and you decide you really have to do the mentor character, who is now a teacher at the school or something like that, or maybe a forest creature that they meet, and that person had their big moment like 10 years earlier. You can do that, but if you can get it closer in time, it's better, because people don't really want to feel too discombobulated, too out of touch when they get into that first chapter. So keep that in mind. That first chapter of book one, that is. So keep that in mind as well. And then, take that idea that you had and run it past your fans. Be like, if you've already got book one out, be like, hey, who would you like to know more about in from book one before things got started? Like if I was to write a prequel story and it's going to focus on, here's my options of which characters it could focus on. Who would you like to know more about? You can do that. Now take that with a grain of salt, because these people have already read book one, so they might not be coming into things exactly fresh, but they might give you a bit of a bellwether as to whether or not you're on the right track, or they might suggest something that you hadn't thought of. So that can also be a great way for you to craft that killer concept. And again, keep in mind, you want to keep it around like that 10 to 15K mark. If you do have to go a bit longer, that's okay, but keep it under 20. You don't want to make it so readers have to read too much to get that end of book, wow, that story hit me in the feels kind of sensation from your stuff. And you also don't have to pay a bunch for editing for something that you're going to be giving away for free. Do also make sure that this is something that can fully intro people into your world. It doesn't have to be super deep, and you can rely on a lot of like not stereotypes exactly, but just standard expectations, because you don't want to do a lot of setup. You really want to take these readers and drop them into action whatever kind of action that is your story is going to have. Reduce the amount of backstory that you're going to have at the beginning of this reader magnet as close to zero as you can get it. If you need to reveal anything about backstory when you dive into this this short tale, do it through character dialogue. Always do it through character dialogue. That's like pretty much a must. So with that, I'm going to let you go forth and start working on this reader magnet. And again, full story, beginning, middle, and end, has to have a climax, has to have an inciting incident, has to have a complication, because you really got to hit all those beats, the major beats, not all the beats, but the major beats of your kind of story. And then you want to, of course, get those major tropes and whatnot not in there as well. And this is not easy to do. This is a difficult thing to do. So if you have to go and like look up trope lists of like what are the most important tropes in your genre online, you got to do that. Make sure you hit them, and think about ways you can squeak in nods to other tropes that might be out there as well. Not everything has to be like overt that you might want to say, but like, hey, if I got like alien abduction, forced proximity, fated mate or something like that, but I've also got these other things that are going to happen later on in the series or in book one, like I don't know, like gladiators or something like that, but I can't have the gladiator angle in the reader magnet. You could hint about, like, have a character who was in the gladiator rings, or have someone talk about the gladiator events. Other ways you can do that to make sure that you are really creating as large a tapestry as you can with as few words as possible. All right, go forth and come up with those amazing ideas. They're going to be awesome. I know it.